blue folder. I probably have it because I know I took notes.
That's at 7 o'clock.
All right, let's do it.
Close enough. I'm going to call this meeting to order. As you are able and willing, please stand for the pledge. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. We do not have anyone who has signed up to deliver public comment, so we'll move right into the report of the secretary. May I have a motion, please? Approve the minutes of our last meeting.
I move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting Wednesday, February 11th, 2026. Second, Rebecca.
Rebecca, thank you. Any comments or questions? The usual, great job.
Yep.
I have to say that. Okay, all in favor? That's 4-0, thank you. Brings us to the report of the chair. I do have a few things to talk about tonight. First, we did meet with town officials back on February 18th. The agenda says I was going to report on the 3/11 meeting, which would have been today, but we moved that meeting at South Berwick's request because they had a town council meeting that was backing up to that. So that 3/11 meeting will actually take place next Wednesday on 3/18. But in the meantime, we did meet on 2/18. South Berwick talked about their budget. There's going to be a decent-sized bump in the budget this year because they're bringing EMS services in-house. We talked about that. That's a long-standing, well-understood thing. Jen reported that noise is progress, so the construction on the town hall renovation is moving forward. What else? There was MDOT public comment on the downtown lights, which will take place in 28, the school light, which is going to be in 27, and then there's a 236 section up to Berwick that's going to get dealt with in 2029. And then, yeah, Elliot did not attend that particular meeting, but Heidi talked about the work that we've done to date on understanding what we can do about the sewer line from the middle school, and about our progress with the budget, the fact that we had received our ED 279 at that point. That's pretty much it. We were going to give them an estimate by the end of the week. I assume we did that, right?
Yep.
As to what that's going to look like, so that's good. Yeah, and of course everybody's in a panic about healthcare because the costs are definitely going up, and we'll see. You're going to talk about that
I am.
in your presentation. So that was a good meeting. I have a report, an update from the Maine School Board Association. We had a meeting a couple of Saturdays ago, and it was a content-rich meeting. So there's three main things I wanted to talk about, and a couple of other minor ones. The Maine Education Policy Research Institute, MEPRI, they're going to conduct what they're calling a citizens' assembly in June. This is fascinating to me. They're going to try to get 4 delegates from each of the 16 counties in Maine, and they have criteria. They want one that's in the 16 or 17-year-old range, one that's 18 to 32, one that is a parent of a pre-K to 12 student, and one that's 55 or older. And then they're going to do random selection with an attempt to balance the cohort among gender, political meaning, educational attainment, ethnicity, all of those things. And those 64, 416 or 64, right? Did that right? Those 64 people will come together for 2 days in June to learn and then to deliberate, to establish what they think ought to be the priorities for education in Maine going forward. Yeah, it's really cool. They did some work about a year ago with a bunch of business leaders where they talked about those kinds of things, specifically in terms of what do you feel like graduates need to be able to do when you get out. But this is going to be a more general population kind of thing. So the recruitment email is going to go out sometime in early April. Watch for that. It's really kind of cool. I'd love to see somebody from our community get involved in that if possible. Fascinating. Okay, we got a presentation from MEPRI on the EPS recommendations. MEPRI took a bunch of months looking at the EPS formula. I think Heidi is actually going to talk about this a little bit more. in her report as well. But they presented to us the recommendations that they were making to the legislature. The recommendations would increase state spending by about $56 million according to their modeling, which means that everybody will get more money generally. Of course, all of their recommendations are going to require changes in state statute. And by the way, that bill was printed within days of their delivery of their report. So the bill is active now in the legislature. They've already had one public hearing on it. They're re-indexing the regional adjustment. The baseline will be 1.0. It used to be that some communities would get a number as low as 0.88 or something like that. Regional adjustment, meaning wages and salaries in your area are lower than they are for the average for the state, so you'll get less money based on that. They're re-indexing it so that it starts at 1. They're going to use a minimum salary matrix system versus an average salary. They're going to shift from salary basis to cost of living basis for those regions, and it's going to be county-based rather than local market area-based. All of which they've done the modeling on a bunch of districts. Most districts will see more money, but there's a few that will wind up being losers, I guess. It was interesting to me, one of the districts they identified as a district that would get less money based on these adjustments was Skowhegan. And the superintendent from Skowhegan went to the public hearing this week and testified in favor of the bill because of what it does for equity across the state. It's a very, very good, positive step forward. Some of our board members made the point that when our legislative committee took action on this particular bill, we moved to support it with testimony, and the answer was, this is a great start. It's not the answer, but it's a great start. There's still a lot of concern about the fact that the other major source of funding is property taxes, and that's becoming a burden for people. Other things, they've updated model parameters so that, for instance, transportation reflects actual costs and better data collection. They're looking at special ed regionalization. Special ed spending is highly variable around the state. They want to shift some aspects of special ed funding to this concept of regional centers. Regional centers, New York State has a model where they use, they call them BOCES. It's a Board of Cooperative Educational Services that sort of regionalizes special ed. So that's being recommended as well. The report, when they talked to us, was due imminently. It has since been issued, as I said, and it's out there. So stay tuned. This, of course, isn't going to affect our current budget situation. This would, if the bill passes, it will be for the 2027-2028 year that the EPS formula will be updated. We got a report out from those folks on the Governor's Commission on School Construction. That report was delivered to the legislature on February 10th. They identified 4 objectives: reducing cost of construction, maximizing existing resources, developing and diversifying the revenue base for school construction, and utilizing data to best advantage. And there were a whole series of recommendations in the report about how to achieve all of those things. The major one was the establishment of what they're calling an Intergovernmental Office of School Infrastructure. Not a finance authority, but a quasi-independent organization that would survive transitions of administration and would be governed by a board comprising state, county, regional, and local government. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. I haven't seen a bill yet in the legislature on that, but that's probably coming as well. And then the last 2 things, we got a little bit of a presentation on school bus safety. There's money in the supplemental budget, $6 million in the supplemental budget to upgrade school buses for things like crossing arms. A third of the buses still need crossing arms installed. This is statewide, and this is for districts that own their own buses. There's a separate question about what do you do for first student or whoever. The intent is that they would comply as well. And 92% of the buses do not have anti-pinch door sensors, so that there's work that's going to have to take place. There's money in the supplemental budget to come up with that. Districts, go ahead.
How does that work for schools to access that money?
Yeah, it's gonna, I think it's a grant program, I think it's
Okay.
gonna, you can apply for it, I
Yeah.
think.
Okay.
And then lastly, of course, the governor's pushed for a cell phone ban statewide, and there is another, I think it's $600,000 in the supplemental budget to help school districts. The good news is, those districts that have already done it can apply for the money to get the, so we'll be able to apply to get what money we spent on the underpunches back. There's a statewide policy that's being developed, and it's probable that we'll have to, our policy committee will have to look at our policy once that comes out. And that would, excuse me, the intent is for that to take effect in September of 2026. So that's for next school year. So that was a content-rich meeting. It was really good.
Wow.
We learned a lot, and that was good stuff. Okay, thirdly, superintendent search update. We met in executive session just prior to this meeting. Review the information we have on the 7 candidates who have submitted their names and their information. I'm happy to report that we have some quality candidates in there, and that we've decided that we're going to go forward with interviewing 3 of those candidates, and those interviews will take place in the week of March 23rd. We're still working on getting that scheduled between our advisory committee and the board, but those will likely take place in the week of March 23rd. Okay, that completes my report. It brings us to the report of the superintendent.
All right, thank you. So we're going to start tonight with my presentation of prospective budget. So I want to start tonight by just saying thank you to all of you for trusting me with this process and spending the next 30 or 40 minutes listening to me talk about our recommendations for the budget going into next school year. I also want to thank my team. I've really tried to use a collaborative approach as we built this budget. I'll talk about the process in a little bit, but just thank you to the cost center managers, to the principals for their work, and most importantly, Ryan. He has been my thought partner. He has been my tech guy, my math guy, all the things. So thank you. I'd like to start tonight by reminding us of the goals that the board set this fall. So we had a couple of meetings and several conversations about what we wanted as goals for this school year. So we talked about student engagement and growth, a culture of compassion and connection, academic excellence and support for all students, and a commitment to preparing future-ready learners. So when we built these goals, we connected those back to our district core values, and I just want us to keep them in the front of our minds as we think about the budget for next year. I think it's helpful, before we get too deep into this, to talk a little bit about who this budget serves. So over on, I guess it's the left-hand side, over here, we talk about the physical assets of the district. So we operate 5 schools in 6 buildings, if you include our central office building. We also rent a transportation facility. All that real estate is appraised at about $122 million. So it's not an insignificant resource. And over here on the right, because we really are in the people business, is the fact that we serve just under 2,100 students. We employ over 350 people. And this past year, we've operated with a budget of just under $39 million. Just a little context. I think enrollment trends are also important to look at. There's a few things I'd like to point out in this slide. So the blue line up at the top, this is our intending enrollment. So this is the last 5 years. We've seen a decrease in enrollment over the last 5 years of a grand total of 37 students. It's just about 1%, little bit more. This orange line represents our special education enrollment. So you can see that just in the last couple of years, we've seen an uptick in students that require special education. And I think it's important to remember that students with special education needs are protected under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and their IEP teams determine what supports they need to access their education. So those are things we have to do. They're things those kids deserve, and it's our obligation as a district to provide them what they need. There's one more trend that I think is worth mentioning. We didn't put it on the slide because it made this slide a little bit busy. But we've also seen in the last 5 years an additional 142 students that are qualifying for free and reduced lunch in our district, which is a pretty big jump. Now, it's a little bit of a questionable indicator, which is another reason why I didn't put it on the slide, because during COVID, our governor made all school meals free for all students. So we had a big dip in people filling out the free and reduced form. We have seen that rebound in the last couple of years. So that's good news, because it's important for people to recognize that by filling out those forms, it allows the district to access other forms of revenue, like it impacts our federal grant funding and that sort of thing. So I encourage people to fill out those free and reduced lunch forms, even though lunch is free. We have seen that coming to play, and I think that the principals have done a really nice job getting those forms back from people. But it is just an indicator that there's potentially some additional students in our district that are facing some economic struggles, and that they might need some extra support as a result of that. So let's talk a little bit about the process that we used this year. So the first thing we did, so this is the first time you guys are seeing this budget, but as an administrative team, we've been working on this together for the last few months. The first thing we did right here in this room was we had a bunch of chart paper, and we just kind of talked about what are your needs for your building? What are your wants? What are your hopes and dreams? Like shoot for the moon, what do you really want down the road? And what efficiencies might we be able to find? Are there ways that we could be more efficient? Are there things that we're currently doing that maybe we're not really utilizing anymore, or things that could be trimmed? So we had those conversations. Those are the same conversations that have happened in years past, but they haven't always happened as a whole group. And one thing that felt important to me was that every cost center manager, whether it was Mr. Hughes in facilities, or Richard, who's new to us, or Ann, who's been here a long time, that they could all hear from each other and try to get that broader perspective about the district. We're one team, and I just think it's important for all the principals and cost center managers to know about the priorities and goals of other departments. So we had that conversation, we processed it, we brainstormed some things, and then we kind of waited until the end of January when we got our ED 279. So the ED 279 is that document we get from the state that tells us what our subsidy allocation is going to look like for the coming year. And at that point, we have real numbers, if you will, that we can play with and start to build out the budget for the coming year. So we got that in the end of January, and then we had individual meetings with the cost center managers and Mr. Hughes. We all got on the same page. We talked through our ideas and just started building the budget. Along the way, we also met with the town and kind of talked about potential impacts there. So that's our process. All right. So one thing that we often spend some time talking about during this budget presentation is our class size policy. If you'll remember, a couple meetings ago, I brought this up to the board, and we talked about whether or not our class size policy was still the will of the board. Are these still the class sizes that you are hoping that we will shoot for? You said they were. So just for the public, pre-K is interesting because pre-K is set by the state. That's a hard 16. We cannot go above 16 in a pre-K classroom. That's with one adult teacher and one adult educational technician. So it's an 8-to-1 ratio in pre-K. The rest of our class size policy numbers are by policy plus or minus 1. So that means a kindergarten classroom could have as few as 13 or as many as 19 students. But if it were going to be below 13 or above 19, that I would bring that to the board and you would approve that. The same is true for the other grade spans. So once we have this conversation and we know what we're shooting for, this becomes really important as part of our zero-based budgeting process. So what we do is we take this policy and then we take our enrollment projections, which the enrollment projections, we're lucky because we're not a highly transient district, so our enrollment projections from one grade to the next are pretty stable. So we know roughly how many second graders are coming out of second grade and going into third grade. So we can predict how many sections we need for each grade level based on that. As you get into the middle school and high school, it gets a little trickier because students are more fluid. We're not in that self-contained model anymore. So that's why you see those bigger spans of 15 to 25, because we need a little more flexibility. So as we looked at our enrollment projections for next year, we're projected to be down 9 students across the entire district. So again, back to that pretty flat blue trend line we saw in the enrollment graph. But what we did see when we looked at the enrollment projections were that we have some shifting cohorts. So when we get into the details a little bit more, probably during the workshops, you will hear me talk about transferring some people from one building to another or from one grade level to another. And this is just based on where those students are and where we need the staff to be as a result of that. So we do see those shifts in certain places. So how we built the budget this year. We used kind of a tiered way of thinking about the budget. So we have the base adjustments and roll forward. I'm going to go into each of these categories a little bit more specifically. What that means is, if we look at our collective bargaining agreements, it is just rolling those forward, the obligations that we have under those collective bargaining agreements for salary and benefits. So it's health insurance, it's dental insurance, it's salaries. That's pretty much what it is. The next tier is level service. So level of service adjustments could be additions or they could be subtractions, but they're what do we need to do to provide the same level of service to our students that we're currently providing based on the student needs. Do we have fewer students, so we need less service? Do we have more students, so we need more service? Do we have students that have shifted from one area to another, so we need to move resources from one area to another? How do we maintain what we're providing in response to student needs? And then the last category, the strategic investments and reductions. This is where I want you to think back about those goals that the board has set. This is where we start to think about what can we do to augment and enhance the student experience. How can we really respond to student interests and the passions of the board and the community, the value sets that we bring to try to continue to improve what we offer educationally. So that's the big idea. So I'm going to dig into each of these just a little bit more. And then basically the way this is laid out is I'm going to lay out the frame and kind of what we're thinking about, and then we'll put numbers on top of it after that, okay? All right, so base adjustments and roll forward. As I said, this is our negotiated agreements with cost of living increases. Our CBAs are roughly 3 to 3.8% by contract. And then insurance. Let's talk a little bit about insurance. Health insurance has been a little tricky this year. We still don't have our complete number. What we were told by the Benefits Trust was that we should plan on not having an increase higher than last year's highest increase of 14%. So last year's, whoever got the highest increase across the state last year paid about a 14% increase. They said they expect it to be below that. So that's good news, sort of. But in the past, I would say we have been really lucky, and we've worked hard. In part, thanks to the board's investment in our employee wellness program, our loss ratios have been really good. We have had very low increases in our health insurance over the last 4 or 5 years. We don't expect to be in that 0 to 3% range this year at all. Our loss ratio is higher this year than it has been in the past. And the climate across the country around health insurance is just tough. So we are sticking with 10%. I know in past years we've started at 10% and we've trimmed away at that as we've gotten a little more information. We're not really comfortable trimming below 10% in our budget projection for this year because of the information we have. So what this actually means for us, because the teachers make up the largest group in our employee pool, and they have a cost-sharing measure in their contract that anything over 6% increase will be shared between the district and the teachers. So the 10% increase that we're budgeting for really probably allows us to go pretty comfortably up to about 12 to 13%. So we feel like we're in the right range with health insurance. Stop me if you have questions too. Okay? So that's our base adjustment and roll forward is really about salaries and insurance.
Patty, excuse me.
Yeah.
We're expecting, I think, to hear it sometime in April.
April 1st.
April 1st?
Yep. Or maybe sooner.
Yep.
You never know. Okay. So level service adjustments. So again, these can be savings or they can be costs. So this is where we look at student need, we look at enrollment, we look at programming, and we say, are there adjustments that need to be made so that we can provide the same level of service to students? So over here on the left under savings, there's a couple areas that we're projecting some savings. So we're recommending 2 half-time position cuts at the high school. As I said before, the high school is the hardest building to get our arms around in terms of enrollment, but we do feel like we have too many classes that are too small at the high school right now. And it's something Dr. Gowers has been very aware of and working on and really has in front of mind as he builds next year's schedule. So we are recommending a half-time science position cut at the high school and a half-time social studies position cut at the high school. We also have some savings in transportation, so this is an interesting one. You might remember a lot of conversations from this fall about how difficult it has been to hire drivers and the ongoing saga of trying to get the transportation system to run as it is intended. Through that process, the good news is we have been able to hire a couple drivers, so it's stabilized, but we also stabilized it through collapsing some runs and combining some runs. And we just don't see undoing that. Like it seems like we're in a good place, things are running well. We have a couple of positions in the budget that we have just never filled. We've never been able to fill them, and it feels like we probably won't fill them. So we have some cuts to take in transportation without impacting any of the service that we currently have. And then over here on the cost side in terms of level service, educational technicians. I mentioned special education enrollment and how that has gone up. A special education student could have a minimal need. They could have a high need and need to be outplaced or anywhere in between. But what we have learned about next year is that we have an increasing need for educational technicians. We need to add 6 educational technicians to the budget. And we actually have budgeted to add 8 so that we can have 2 in reserve. Because in the past, we've budgeted for a certain amount and then we've needed more. I mean, just at Central School alone, I think we had 3 or 4 students who needed support walk through the door in August that we didn't know were coming. So it's very important that we have a little bit of a cushion built in for educational technician support. The other cost on the level service side is around our athletic trainer. You may remember from past years that we have had like a multi-year phased in kind of a contract for athletic training. And there's some additional costs that we're going to need to pick up in this year's budget that's part of the agreement that we signed on to. And then the last piece here, this is where we start to think about the goals of the board and talk about what kind of strategic investments we would be recommending. So over here in staffing and support, one thing I'm recommending is the addition of a half-time assistant principal at Central School. And let me explain how that would work. So at Central School right now, we have a person retiring who is a part-time literacy coach and a part-time reading interventionist. We have a plan to have the reading intervention portion of that covered by a teacher who has some additional capacity, which I will talk about a little bit later. And I'd like to take the lit coach position and to combine that with the assistant principal into a full-time student and instructional support person. And I think this serves two primary purposes when it comes to those goals. One, it's a safety issue. We are in a position right now in our 3 elementary schools where if a principal is out, there's no administrator covered. We do our best. Andrea fills in, Scott fills in. I'll swing by if I can. But having one more person in that pool that could be a coverage person would be really helpful from a safety perspective. The other thing is about academic excellence and student support. It's around having another person that can help support strong instruction in the building. We're also recommending a small amount of additional administrative assistant support for athletics. So you're going to hear me talk a couple of times throughout this presentation about really augmenting our middle school athletics program. I would say it's been underfunded in past years, and right now the administrative assistant support for athletics is kind of, we have one person in the office here at the high school who does a lot, but then we have little pieces that have been parsed out to different people. We're proposing that we pull that all back under one person that can support both the middle school and high school athletics programming. We're also proposing a 1/5 marketing, public relations, and communications position. This is about telling our story. It's about having somebody who has the skill set and the background to push the positive and really get that word out in the community. And so much amazing stuff is happening in our schools, and we're all working super hard, and we don't necessarily have the skills to be writing those news articles and pushing the positive the way we could.
Heidi,
Yeah.
can I just ask you one question? Can you explain what 1/5?
We budgeted for like 8 to 10 hours a week.
Okay.
And we don't know if that would be a human or a firm that we would use, but we just wanted to put a
Yes.
placeholder in there.
Okay.
Yeah. We also, if we look down here at facilities and transportation, one investment I'm proposing is a middle school playground. It says middle school playground updates. We don't currently have a middle school playground, we have a parking lot. So I'm pretty excited to work with Christine and Mr. Hughes and build something that's appropriate for middle schoolers for their wellness time so they can have fun outside in a safe and engaging way. We also need to purchase 3 new vans for the transportation department. Those vans put on some serious miles. The vans we're talking about phasing out all have over 200,000 miles on them. It's time for some new ones. In terms of investing in the student experience and opportunities. So again, this goes back to student engagement. It goes back to future-ready learners. We have a recommendation for some additional money to support Pinkham Notch, to support SATs. So we pay for students, if they take the SAT during the school day, we pay for that. It's an equity issue, and we need to put some money in the budget to support that. I'm also recommending the addition of a half of a world language teacher. And I struggled with whether this should go under strategic investments or level service, but I decided to put it here. We've been kind of limping along for the last couple years in an overloaded capacity for world language here at the high school. They've got a couple of teachers teaching an extra class to try to cover the needs. So there's a need here at the high school for more world language, but we also don't want to shortchange the middle school, who also has a ton of interest for more world language. So there's an additional half position there to support that. I'm also excited about, again, future-ready learners. I'm recommending that a technology teacher who currently is a .65 for us get moved to full-time, and she's gonna spend part of her day at the middle school and part of her day here at the high school, which is gonna be able to allow us to be able to offer classes like drones and robotics and C++ programming and Python and some coding, cybersecurity, those sorts of courses. We've been able to add those to the high school program of studies, and so we're excited about that. And lastly, intervention, and this comes back to academic excellence and student support. I'm recommending a new math interventionist at Central School, and this is a new add position, and this to me is just following the data. It's looking, Central School has the most elementary students. They're our biggest elementary school, and they have the most students that need math intervention, and we just need more resources in that category. All right. Excuse me. We also have some strategic reductions. We have a part-time grants position at the central office that we're proposing eliminating. This is a position that we hired really to kind of help us recover from COVID. We had a lot of grants that were kind of piled up. The state was behind, which put us behind, and we've been able to get caught up, so we don't really feel like we need that position anymore. So we're recommending that cut. We're also recommending repurposing. This is, you're going to hear me talk about efficiency in a little bit. I talked earlier about taking that half of a reading interventionist and having a teacher fill in that part. So I've got a teacher at Central and a teacher at Elliott who both have some capacity available to support reading intervention. And so I think that's going to work out really well. We're going to be able to keep the same level of student support and be more efficient about it. Here's my efficiency slide. So I talked just now about capturing underutilized capacity among some of our teachers to support intervention. I also had a wonderful meeting with our drafting and woodworking teacher here at the high school, and he's a staff member who offers a really important aspect of curriculum to kids, but often doesn't have full classes. So he is going to continue to offer those great classes here at the high school, but he's also going to spend part of his day at Marshwood Middle School offering some hands-on learning for our middle school students, some banging and sawing and hammering and all of those things that they need, that hands-on, build something, make something kind of experiences. Also, in terms of operational efficiency, we are proposing, we have somebody in our office at the central office, she's part of the tech department, but she is leaving us at the end of June, and we are proposing reorganizing that position a little bit, which allows us to save about a half a position in the technology budget. All right, so now I'm going to talk numbers. I'm going to kind of lay the numbers over the top of what I just explained. So I said before, the roll forward and base adjustments is the biggest cost driver. This is the biggest chunk of the new money that we're talking about in this budget. So as you can see, just the cost of living increases for staff in our contracts is $770,707. And our 10% budgeted increase in health insurance is $377,986. So all told, it's a little over 1.1 million for roll forward and base adjustments. Now, level service adjustments go in two directions, right? There's things that we cut that we save money on and things that we added that cost money. So I'll start with the things that save us money. So we have those 2 half-time positions at the high school, which save us about $35,000 apiece. And we have the reductions in transportation based on our ability to not even fill those positions. That's about $100,000 that we save in transportation. However, I also mentioned the additional educational technicians to meet students' needs. That's about a $400,000 cost. The athletic training, which is something we are obligated to do by the contract we signed, is about an extra $25,000. And similarly, we'll talk the same way here about the strategic investments. Let's talk about the reductions first. So reorganizing reading intervention room support saves us about $52,000. Cutting that grants position at the central office saves about $17,000. And we save about $45,000 by reorganizing the technology position. So those are some savings to offset the additions we are talking about. So the half-time assistant principal will cost about $65,000. We have $25,000 budgeted for communication and public relations, $12,000 for extra athletic admin assistant support, a little over $10,000 for those student experiences. That's the SAT, the Pinkham Notch, those sorts of experiences. The halftime world language is about $65,000. Athletics we talked about. New vans will be on a lease purchase. That's a $35,000 a year item. The 1/3 technology teacher is about $28,000. The math interventionist is $107,000. That's a full position. And then the MMS playground, we have about $25,000 set aside. And I, in my conversations with Christine, have really looked at this middle school playground as like a 3-year process of like, let's build phase 1 and see how the kids like it and see what they want, and then we'll continue to do this over the next couple years till we get them something good. Let me go back. So the total in terms of strategic investments is $284,000. I also want to talk a little bit about some upcoming facilities projects. So we're not recommending adding any additional dollars to facilities for this year. We have had several meetings with Mr. Hughes, and he's done a really nice job of laying out kind of a 5-year plan for some of our shorter term projects and some of our longer term projects, and really sort of creating a 5-year calendar to make sure that our facilities are appropriately maintained. This is just some of the projects for each of the schools that we've committed to doing this summer and throughout next year. And it's really just about maintaining, about making sure our facilities are safe and that they're clean, productive places to learn. So it's everything from sealing a building to epoxying floors, replacing windows, cutting down trees that need to get cut down, fixing bathrooms. It seems like we're always fixing bathrooms. Maintaining paint and carpet and just all the things that need to be maintained. But we have a good plan and it feels doable. Whoa, we went fast. So what we're requesting and proposing as a budget for the coming year is the $1,148,693 for the roll forward, the $255,000 in level service, and the $284,000 in strategic investments, for a total of $1,687,693 in new expenditures being proposed. So what this slide does is show you how that breaks down by warrant article. So these are the articles that we end up, this is sort of how we organize the budget. So when you start looking at your budget books, these are the areas that we'll talk about. So I'm not going to talk through all of these, but I just want to point out a couple of highs and lows so you understand why they look the way they look. So we already talked about special education. This is all about adding staff. That's why that number's gone up. You see a small reduction of just over $1,000 in vocational. So we are not proposing that less kids engage in vocational education. We have gotten some additional seats at Sanford, and we're hopefully going to be using fewer seats at Dover. So Dover's very costly compared to Sanford, and it has some other challenges that go along with it. So we're trying to lean away from Dover and more into Sanford, and it does, even though Sanford's costs have gone up, it does save us money to do that. Extracurriculars here is at 8.8% increase. That is for a couple reasons. One, we need to make some investments in Marshwood Middle School athletics. We don't remember the last time they had new uniforms. Their supply budgets are limited. We've really been lucky with Mr. Bean stepping into that sort of assistant athletic director role and really supporting the middle school the way he has. But we need to make sure he has the resources to do what he wants to do for that program. The other big driver in the extracurricular section of the budget is the fact that by the teacher contract, our stipend points go up by $5 a point next year. So for all the stipends that we pay, there's an increase. System administration is showing about a 10% increase. That is for a couple reasons. One, there's an additional half-time assistant principal being proposed. We have a new admin contract. And then we also have a couple of administrators that we've hired that have been on a probationary status, and we're being paid sort of a little bit less than the base salary, and we need to get them up to the base salary for their position. Student transportation we talked about. Those are unfilled positions that we're taking out of the budget. Okay. All right. I think it's helpful also sometimes to look at the budget by cost center code. And the reason I like this slide, and I think it's important, is right here. 67.5% of our entire budget is salary. Another 17.44% is benefits. So we're in the people business. I think sometimes there's a perception that we can buy a few less textbooks or a few less computers and it's going to make a significant difference in the budget. This is about people. 85% of our budget is salaries and benefits. That's important to remember. So let's talk about what that means for taxes. So what we're asking for in terms of an increase translates into a 3.95% increase to the taxpayers. That's the request that we have. Now it's split between South Berwick and Elliott in a pretty lopsided way this year, and I'm going to dig into why a little bit so that I can help you all understand, and hopefully anybody watching, because you look at those numbers and be like, why is that like that? That doesn't seem right. So I also think it's important to remember that if you think about the items that we talked about, so we're asking for really an additional $853,189 in additional tax revenue. Just the cost of those educational technicians and health insurance is about $800,000, right? When you just look at those two items, and those aren't things we have much control over. So I do think one way that we can help understand the cost sharing and why there's a discrepancy between Elliott and South Berwick is by looking historically. And I know that this is hard for you guys to see because it's small, but you will get the presentation, I promise. If you look over here on the left, this is the overall tax increase. And I think if you look historically, there's a 10-year average. We have asked for a 3.06% increase on average over the last 10 years, which is right in line with cost of living increase. There's nothing crazy. Our lowest was 1.94. Our highest was 5.57. This year we are asking for 3.95. If you look over here at Elliott and South Berwick, you can see that based on the cost sharing mechanism, the last couple of years have really sort of hit South Berwick harder and Elliott less significantly. But if you look down here, there was a time when that was reversed. But overall, again, if you look at that 10-year, over the last 10 years, the average change at Elliott has been 2.56%, and the average change in South Berwick has been 3.63%. So they've both been in that 2 to 3% kind of range. Okay. So I think that people sometimes struggle to understand sort of why. Why is South Berwick's going up as much as it is? And this is just a very simple visual that shows, if you look, the pink line represents property value growth in Elliott. So property value growth in Elliott has been, over the last couple of years, between 6 and 7%. Property value growth in South Berwick over the last couple of years has been between 13 and 15%. So these property valuations drive our required contribution in the mill rate, with the mill rate in the EPS formula. So when property values accelerate rapidly, that the state then says that that community can pay more. So if we look at this, I think what this shows us here is there's two parts to it, right? When we determine what we're asking for in terms of taxes, there's two pieces. This is a required local contribution. This is based on property values and the mill rate expectation. So you can see that for next year, even though South Berwick sees a much bigger increase, Elliott is actually paying more. So Elliott is projected to pay $7,335,207.09, while South Berwick is required to pay $6,309,207.09. 6,309,280, oh, that's a lot. I'm lost in that number. It's a big number. But this is required. This is part of the EPS formula. This is the part where they say this is what your community has to pay as their required local contribution to education. And then what we also have, as almost every school district in Maine has, is this additional local contribution. This is the portion that is subject to the cost-sharing agreement that the voters of Elliott and South Berwick approved in 2007. So it's 50% based on those property values and 50% based on enrollment. And that's not something the school district created or decided. That was the voters in the two towns. So what's interesting is that you can see that South Berwick's contribution is higher, Elliott's contribution is also higher. South Berwick's being asked to pay a little bit more than Elliott in terms of that additional local, but they also have 220 more students from South Berwick. So South Berwick's kind of getting hit with the double whammy because they have the increased property values and 220 more students. So when you look at the way the cost sharing formula breaks down, that's why there's such a big difference. I hope that made sense. Okay, so I also think it's important when we're talking about budget to think about and look at how we compare to other districts. We typically do this. We typically have looked at our SRTC sending schools or other regional partners, and many of those schools are on this list. Sanford, Noble, Kittery, Wells. Here's Marshwood in pink, Kennebunk, and York over here. Those are all SRTC schools. But we also felt it was important to include some like demographic areas, some school districts that we like to compare ourselves to academically, and some school districts that have very similar median household incomes to Elliott and South Berwick. And those are Scarborough is here, Freeport, and Yarmouth. So we chose 10 schools. Again, most of them are SRTC schools, and we added a few demographic like schools. So as you can see,